Welcome back. Today we are looking at a fascinating geopolitical and economic anomaly. Why the United States is losing the high-speed rail race to a developing nation like Vietnam. We are going back to 1976 and see how the whole scene turned 50 years later. Second, we will examine the physics and economics of high-speed rail. Then we will explaining the Asian cheat code, the famous rare plus property model, and explaining why American can't copy it. Fourth, we will dive into Vietnam's geopolitical game and see how they balance between superpowers and national interest. Finally, we will close with our conclusion: what's the systematic risk and the real estate bubble behind these Asian infrastructure projects. Let's look back in 1976. The Vietnam War has just ended. After 20 brutal years of conflict, the country is in ruin. Back then, Vietnam's GDP per capita was less than 100 US dollar. It was one of the poorest and most isolated economy in the world. Meanwhile, the United States was at the peak of its tech and economic power. The shining glass tower of World Trade Center in New York had just been finished. NASA had pulled off the project of landing on Moon 6 times. The futuristic design Concorde jet was landing in Washington. Back then, if someone made a bold prediction, and they say in 50 years this poor Southeast Asian country will build a high-speed rail system faster than the richest nation on earth, you will think they were crazy. 50 years later, in April 2026, Vietnam officially started building a next-generation high-speed rail. On the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the California high-speed rail is still a disaster with no end in sight. After more than a decade and a budget blowing past 100 billions. Why is America losing this high-speed rail race? And this time, the country beating the US isn't even relied on China's capital or technology to do it. The answer is actually hidden in an Asian cheat code. It's a real estate trick that deeply ties infrastructure to land. And this trick is something that US can't copy. To understand why the US is stuck, we first have to face a physical reality. Why does building a high-speed rail cost tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars? Because to keep the train safe and perfectly smooth at 350 km per hour, the track must be almost perfectly straight and flat. They have to blast long tunnels through the mountains and build viaducts over waters and cities. Adding millimeter-perfect seamless trucks and massive power system. So every single kilometer costs a fortune. With this mind-blowing cost, we have to bust the biggest myth about high-speed rail. High-speed rail make profit by selling tickets. The reality? Most of the high-speed railways around the world lose money on ticket alone, except for a few golden routes connecting massive megacities like Japan's Tokaido Shinkansen or China's Beijing-Shanghai line. Over 90% of the global high-speed rail are bleeding cash. If they lose money, why do Asian countries keep building them like crazy? In Asia, a high-speed rail is never just a way to get around. It's a giant money printer made of land. When you put a station in the middle of nowhere on a worthless farmland, the travel time to the city gets slashed. Suddenly, that land's value doubles, or even skyrocket by dozens of times. If you only sell train tickets, you will never feel the multi-million-dollar holes of building the railway. So you must also own the right to develop the land around the stations. This is the Chico of Asian railway development, the rail plus property model. Whether it's Japan's private railway, Hong Kong's MTR, or Taiwan's high-speed rail, the game is the same. The government or a big corporation buys the land around the station for pennies. After building the station, they turn the surrounding area into luxury housing, shopping malls, and office buildings. Simply put, selling tickets is a charity. Building malls, selling houses and offices is the real business. But in America, with the most powerful financial system in the world, this model isn't work. This comes down to Americans' foundation, private property rights. In Asia, the government easily sees land for profitable development. But in the US, taking land trigger endless lawsuit. Just look at the California high-speed rail disaster. But in the US, government can't act like massive real estate developer, making railways a pure public expense. Well, the US is stuck in the desert because of the system. Vietnam has pushed this cheat code to the edge. Fast forward to April 2026. Vietnam officially broke ground on the Hanoi to Quang high-speed rail. This 120-kilometer line, costing $5.6 billion, will crush a 2-hour drive down to just under 30 minutes. But the most shocking truth about this project is the contractor. The winner of this massive deal was Vingroup, a subsidiary of Vingroup, Vietnam's biggest private real estate developer. To understand this weird decision, we first have to understand the complex geopolitical calculation behind the Vietnamese government. This railway connects seamlessly with China's high-speed rail network. Since they want to connect with China, letting China build it will be the cheapest and fastest choice. But Vietnam's saying no because they studied the painful lesson of the two neighbors. Laos couldn't afford the massive debts of the China-Laos Railway. So they were forced to hand over the prime land development along the route to Chinese government. Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail promised not to use the national budget, but massive costs forced the government to use taxpayers' money to fill a bottomless pit. Vietnam is playing it smart. They want China's market and logistic route, but they don't want the foreign debt trap or technology control. So Vingroup using a trick, borrowing a chicken to lay eggs. They went straight to the German industrial giant Siemens. Germany provide the most advanced trains and the system, and promised they will transfer the core technology to Vietnam. It's a perfect defensive strategy. Link the hardware to China, partner with Germany for the tech, and keep the actual control firmly in the hand of a Vietnamese company. But here's the problem. Where does this $5.6 billion come from? This is the core metric trick of this whole game. Vingroup pitched an extreme financing plan to the government called the 2080 leverage. The $5.6 billion, Vingroup only puts 20% of their own money. For the remaining 80%, nearly $4.5 billion, they asked the Vietnamese government to issue bonds and borrow internationally, and then lend them money back to Vingroup. Here is the craziest part. Vingroup demands this to be a 35-year loan, 0% interest. On top of that, the nearly $400 million cost of buying land and relocating people along the route is fully paid by the government's budget. In short, the Vietnamese government has to use taxpayers' money to borrow funds, pay 35 years of this massive interest for this private company, and use state power to clear the land for them, for free. In any Western country, this contract will be considered as the worst kind of government corruption. So why did the Vietnamese government agree to such an unfair deal? And what is the Vingroup actually after? If we break down the logic on both sides, it all makes sense. From the Vietnamese government's perspective, this is a compromise for the national survival. In the Asian development state model, the government doesn't have any new technology or efficiency of a private company. The only fix is to build their own national team. For the government, they trade financial profit to get Vingroup to take on this mega project, ensuring the rail gets built. Then from the Vingroup's perspective, this is a real estate leverage costs almost nothing but pay out huge. Corporations don't do charity. If you look at the map of this high-speed rail, you will spot a shocking coincidence. The starting point and the end point aren't just randomly empty lot. They happen to be the locations of upcoming mega township project and luxury malls owned by Vingroup. This is what the deal is really about. Vingroup doesn't care how much money they make from selling train tickets. They are using a tiny amount of their own cash, taking a huge interest-free loan from the state, letting the government handle the massive land dispute, all to build a $5.6 billion amenity for their all-massive real estate projects. Once the trend runs, the skyrocketing real estate profit along the route will go straight into Vingroup's pocket. This perfect combination of state power, private capital, and real estate development allow Vietnam to successfully launch its high-speed rail. But does this Asian chic clothes come with no price? The fatal flaw of this perfect machine is that it's built on the promise that the house prices will always go up. The magic of rare plus property is basically taking a cash advance on future land values to fill today's construction money pit. As long as the economy grows fast, people keep moving to the cities, and the citizens are willing to pay for the new houses next to the stations. This loop works perfectly. To see how this break, look at China. Local governments build remote high-speed rail stations just to sell the surrounding dirt to mega developers. These developers borrow mountains of cash to build massive new towns. But without real job, nobody moves in. When houses wouldn't sell, the debt bubble popped. Real estate giant collapsed under hundreds of billions in debt. What happens if Vietnam's economy slows down in the next few years? What happens if the massive township project at both ends of the rail turns into unwanted ghost towns, just like what happened in China? If Vingroup's cash flow breaks and they can't pay their debts, that $4.5 billion interest-free loan instantly turned into a massive national debt. That means that when the corporations succeed at flipping land, the profits are private. But when the real estate bubble bursts, the crushing debt of the high-speed rail must be paid by every taxpayer in Vietnam. This is the extremely expensive hidden cost of the high-speed rail. Looking back, did the U.S. really lose this high-speed rail race? On the surface, those half-finished concrete pillars in California desert are definitely a public works joke. But from the other angle, because the U.S. government doesn't have the power to manipulate land finance, America dodged this destructive debt bubble caused by tying infrastructure to real estate. Vietnam built a high-speed rail before America isn't just a simple victory of technology. It's a massive gamble. Vietnam has bet its national sovereignty, its finance, and its future on a 120-kilometer railway. Infrastructure is never just a boring engineering problem. It is a mirror reflecting how every country chooses to build wells and how it looks at the land. So next time you sit on a high-speed rail train in Asia, don't forget what's right under your feet isn't just advanced transportation, it is incredible dangerous land finance engine.